I looked up the nickname of San Diego to see if it had some cool name, like the City of Angels or the City That Never Sleeps or something like that. No, all the nicknames were lame. It was like America's Finest City or the Plymouth of the West, or some horrifically racist, old-timey term for Italian people. Come on, San Diego. Go back to the drawing board. However, speaking of going back to the drawing board, look at me, I'm really good at transitions. I am going to be talking about beta reading. Now, while reading and writing, I tend to think to myself, what would I do if I was a beta reader? What would I write in the margins? I would do this, I would change that, I would write this, I would do that. And I think from a reader's point of view, beta reading seems really easy. With that being said, to everyone who I've ever asked to beta read my manuscript, I apologize. It is so much harder than it seems. And now I know this firsthand. So I read this manuscript of a sci-fi, a historical fiction, a historical sci-fi. I don't really know. We'll get to that later. But it was called The Shattered Sky by Amber Denson. I actually don't know this author personally, but hopefully when this book is actually ready to be published, I hope that I see it on shelves. And I would be as unbiased as possible about my actual opinions of it and the actual critiques that I have of it, because it's not finished yet. I think that as a beta reader, your critiques need to be between you and the author. How can I say my opinion of a completely unfinished book? If it is published, I would be happy to use my small following to help review it and help market it if possible, because I really genuinely think that this manuscript is going places. Basically, The Shattered Sky is about a group of dromaeosaurs, which are these small bird-like critters that are very similar to velociraptors that lived around the time of the mass extinction event. And I don't know the author personally. Hell, I didn't even come across her in an actual writing circle. It was in a completely different context. But I think if you want to be a social writer, you have to be a social reader. And if you want to do that, you have to keep your eyes peeled for different contexts in which you can read and new material. I think the idea behind the point of beta reading is that your best critiques are going to come from unbiased strangers. But what happens when you are the unbiased stranger? You have to consider how much responsibility that is. Not only do you have to read for the purpose of beta reading and not necessarily your entertainment, you have to consider how much time and how much effort and how much emotional investment goes into writing something. Nobody writes tens of thousands of words and doesn't get in some way attached to it. You also have to remember that your beta reader really trusts you to get this done and to give them reasonable feedback. So there's a lot of pressure on both sides. I'm grateful that this manuscript was actually interesting to me. One of the reasons why I was so into it is because I love dinosaurs. A big reason why I'm learning to scuba dive is so I can go look at the crater firsthand. The reason why I like keeping birds as pets is because they're so dinosaur-like. I'm obsessed with dinosaurs. So this book was really easy to get to. But what if it was a little bit less interesting? What if it was about something that I don't find as fascinating, like cars or math or building things? Sometimes it's not even a matter of the subject matter. It can be about something that you find completely fascinating. Even if you agree to beta read it because it sounds interesting, it might not grab your attention. It might not have captivating characters. It might not have captivating world building. You don't have to finish it. Most beta readers don't get paid. I think if your author is paying you, you probably should finish it. But if not, then it's better to give some feedback than no feedback at all. Me personally, I'd rather go into something and say, I was unable to finish it for these reasons, than to not say anything at all. And I know there's a lot of anxiety in that. You don't want to hurt their feelings, but sometimes that's better. You also have to consider sometimes beta readers are just busy. But even then, it's better to just tell them, hey, something came up and I can't finish it, than to just leave it be. Because more anxiety than not telling them that their book is great is not telling them anything at all. Sitting there and waiting for a beta reader to get back to you can be nerve-wracking. Another tip about beta reading is probably knowing your strengths. For instance, I know that I'm terrible at line editing. I do not have the detail orientation for grammar and punctuation. I look at the manuscript that I just beta read for, I'm pretty sure I only had one line edit because anything else from me would have just been the blind leading the blind. I'm good at analyzing characters, plot, and genre. And oh my god, speaking of genre, a book like this has to have this really interesting balance between fiction, such as the egg dreams that the dinosaurs would have. They had dreams inside of their eggs that affected how their personalities turned out, and factual. For instance, the dromaeosaurs being a bird-like theropod that's similar to velociraptors. This author did a ton of research, and I think a big part of beta reading is praising them, because that's important too, because they might see other parts of their manuscript that is similar to something that you liked and be able to edit that based on that. I was conflicted as to the types of critique that I would give to it, because I think both genres, historical fiction and science fiction, need to be critiqued through different lenses. So you end up asking yourself, is it science fiction because historians generally don't study paleontology? Or is it historical fiction because science fiction usually involves technology and questioning things about humanity? And how can you have questions about humanity when all the humans in this universe are scurrying little proto-primates? And the asteroid strike that occurred in 65 million BC is a historical event. So if it's historical fiction, what parts of science fiction are we excluding? Why would we exclude paleontology? But then again, if I wrote a book from the point of view of someone from Earth who has prophetic dreams about, let's say, the 1883 Krakatoa event, that would be a historical fiction. But if I write a story about a world that has a completely different atmosphere and different life forms, that has a disaster that literally comes tumbling out of the cosmos, that's a science fiction. So it's possible that a narrative like The Shattered Sky is both. And I could rant about this in the margins of my beta reading all day, but the thing is, that's not my job. As a beta reader, my job is to analyze plot holes, to look at inconsistencies, to look at things that should be added or deleted to the world building or the character building. It should be to make sure that literary tools are implemented to maintain my suspension of disbelief in a story about talking bird lizards. I think the distinction between beta reading and just reading comes from the difference in analysis versus correction. And it's not about you, it's about the author. I think that's one of the things that made beta reading a little bit challenging for me. It wasn't even the narrative or the author or anything. It was the fact that I kept getting distracted by my own imagination. And I'm glad that I don't have to read published works in the same way that one has to read something that they're critiquing. But that said, I am very thankful for the opportunity to have read Shattered Sky. And to the author, if you are watching this, I hope my critiques were able to be a little bit helpful, and thanks again for letting me read, and thank you for joining me on my run.